Well, thank you, Lou, for that introduction, and thank you to everybody that has joined the session. I hope you find it useful. So, there's a little bit about me first. I went to King Ed's in 2017 to 2019, and I studied geography, psychology, and law. That was where I found my passion for law and decided that I wanted a legal career. Um, so yeah, once I decided that that was what I wanted to do, I went to a law firm and got a bit of law experience just before I joined Birmingham City University for my law degree. So I did a 3-year law degree, and then I went on to study my master's in law and my legal practice course. So I'll go into the legal practice course a little bit further into this talk, but as one of the steps to becoming a solicitor, which has recently changed, so I'll go into that later on. But back when I was training, you had to do a legal practice course. So that was the route that I took. During my time at BCU, I was there between 2019 and 2023. I took part in a vacation scheme during my 3rd year of university. A vacation scheme is something that you'll hear a lot if you're trying to get into the legal industry. And essentially, it's a bit of a fancy word for work experience. And the week's process, you basically get to go into different departments of the firm. You learn more about the firm, they learn about you. And then you have to take part in an interview. And for me, I had to do a presentation process as well. And then at the end of that week, if the firm would like to offer you a job, which is called a training contract when you want to qualify as a lawyer, they will offer that you at the end of the week. So a little bit now about what a training contract is. So whilst things are changing, presently firms are providing training contracts to aspiring lawyers. This is where you spend 2 years training in different areas of a firm. So the way that my firm has it set up is that you do 6 months in 4 different areas of law. So for me, I did a 6 month, they call it a seat, in family law, and then I did another 6 months in the private client department. So that's dealing with wills, lasting powers of attorneys, and like trusts. I then went on to a dispute resolution seat where I did property disputes and then commercial litigation. So I'll go into property disputes in a moment, as that's what I ended up going into. But then in the commercial litigation side of things, that can be dealing with if you are a company and somebody came to you and bought a product from you but then never paid, you can then try and make a claim against them for that money. Or if you have you've made a product and then somebody's copying you, you could then look at copyright infringement potentially. So that's just a little bit of information about that. And then for my last seat, I stayed in property litigation, which, as I said, is property disputes. So my training contract ran from 2023 to September 2025. In September 2025, I qualified as a solicitor. So I'm now an associate in the property disputes team at Higgs LLP. So Higgs is a firm of about 280 people, not far from Merry Hill. I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with Merry Hill. So yeah, we're not too far from there. And I've been qualified in the team for about 4 months now, and really enjoying it. I find that as a junior lawyer, there's always lots to learn, and it can get very busy at times. But I really like it. I find it very, always motivates me. It's always stimulating, and I do enjoy the pressure when it is there. So if we have a court deadline, for example, or a court hearing, sometimes, you've really got to focus all day, get the work done, and I enjoy that kind of pressure. So if you find that, having attention to detail or working under pressure is something that you enjoy, a legal career might be for you. Okay, so in terms of the kind of thing that I do in my role, so you could, as I've said, there are lots of different many areas of law. So there's family law, which is like divorces, children issues, there's personal injury, clinical negligence, there's corporate, which is like mergers and acquisitions, so the buying and selling of businesses. There is residential property, so people that deal with buying and selling houses, buying and selling land. You could also go into contentious trusts and probate, and these are disputes that arise after somebody has unfortunately passed away. We also have an employment team at Higgs. We have a succession planning. So honestly, there are so many different areas of law that you could go into. And, you know, by getting work experience, looking into a legal career, you might get a bit of a sway as to what it is that you like. So when I did my LPC, we had to do a property module, and I didn't really love it very much. So I was really surprised actually when I decided I wanted to qualify into property disputes. But from my 2-year training contract, it really showed me that I wanted to do a dispute area of law rather than what we call transactional. So when I say dispute, it means that matters can go to court and they have to be dealt with, and a judge will decide essentially who the winner or who the loser is. Whereas with transactional work, this could be seen as your corporate, so you're buying and selling businesses. You wouldn't usually go to court with those kind of matters. Instead, you like start the transaction and then you get it completed at the end. Again, with like commercial property, you are you know, buying or selling a property, or if you are a landlord, which means you own a building or own a chunk of land, you may lease that building to what is known as a tenant. And then we can help you draw up the lease, which is basically a document which governs how that tenant stays in that property. So for example, you know, the landlord will say, you need to pay me rent of £2,000 every month on the first of the month. So that lease basically details all the information that you could possibly need. So then moving back to property disputes and what it is that I do. So it's a really wide-ranging area of law, and no 2 days are the same. In my role, I have clients that are both individuals and that are businesses. So it's really varied, and I enjoy the contact between an individual, but then I also enjoy working with businesses, because sometimes the businesses can be a little bit more commercially minded, whereas with individuals, because it's their dispute, they get more emotionally invested. So I have spoken to clients before that can get upset over the phone because, you know, they're in such a difficult situation and this dispute is you know, consuming their lives, but you don't usually get that emotional element with businesses. So for me, I like having the two that I can dip in and out of, because some people find, say family law, for example, where you're only acting for people in stressful situations, they don't enjoy the emotional toll that it takes on them potentially. So for me, I find a mix between the two works really well. So in terms of examples of what I do, hopefully this doesn't bore any of you, but I find it, obviously, you know, I love it because it's what I chose to do. But as an example, if you have a neighbour and there is a fence that runs between the two houses, your neighbour, say on the right hand side, might think that fence needs to be in one position, but then the neighbour on the other side thinks that it needs to be in another position. We've had situations where our client has come home and that fence has been knocked down and then moved completely into their garden because the neighbour thinks that all of that land should be theirs. And then our client is left in a situation where they've lost meters of their garden, and they don't really know where they stand. They don't know if their neighbour's correct in what they're saying, or they don't know if the neighbour is wrong. So then they come to us and we have to look at the documents that were, they're called title deeds, and they're held by the land registry. So then we have to look at those documents and we investigate the title plan. We investigate if there is any sort of deeds or easements involved, so that we can try and ascertain where that boundary should lie. Because obviously my role is very land and property based, as you'd expect, we often deal a lot with surveyors, which is something that I really enjoy in my role. So I get to make contacts with people that would come out and they would have a look at the title plans as well, and they would essentially get markers to map out the boundary between the two properties. So it's a really nice way to meet lots of people in different industries. As I touched on, the area of law that I do is dispute work, and we can go to court. I also deal with barristers quite a lot, which is nice because you get to build those strong relationships. So just another couple of things about my role that I think you should consider if you wanted to go into this world, is whilst I find it very rewarding, I love what I do, I find it very stimulating, I enjoy helping people through difficult situations. Um, Dispute work and just being a lawyer in general, it does come with its pressures at times. So that's something just to consider. Um, so you're always learning something new, but you will have deadlines to hit. You will have client needs to meet. And then you'll also need to hit your own financial targets. So lawyers, have a way of charging their clients, and we do it by hourly rates. So essentially, a client is paying for a lawyer's time. So when I'm doing work for a client, I have to put a timer on which times how long it takes me to do a particular task. And then at the end of the matter or at the end of the month, we charge the client for that. So let's just say my hourly rate was £50 per hour, and then the job took me an hour to do, that client would then be charged £50. So that's how it works. So you do have those kind of financial targets that you have to meet yourself, which, sometimes can lead to you having to work really hard. But I can say myself, I haven't worked too many really late hours. On a handful of occasions, I've had to stay a little bit late at work just to make sure we hit the deadlines if we've got a court hearing. But as I was saying earlier, I really enjoy that pressure to the job and needing the attention to detail. So if these kind of things resonate with you and you think it's something that you could enjoy, it's definitely a career that I would recommend looking into. Another thing that I enjoy about a legal career is that I get to network with other people from different industries. So if you feel, or even if you don't, if you enjoy talking to people and creating a connection, a legal career, or even a route like an accountant or a surveyor, a lettings company, it's really good for you and people in those industries to network with other people, because it can help you build your own connections for future opportunities, whether that was a referral from a surveyor for me to deal with a dispute, or I could refer work to a barrister for them to deal with a matter. So networking is something that I really do enjoy. And if you see yourself as somebody that likes making those connections and is confident, talking in a room to new people, this is something that you might enjoy in a legal career. So there are different ways that you can get into a legal career. As I explained earlier, my route was through university, and then I did my legal practice course, then I did my 2-year training contract, and then I qualified as a solicitor by the end of it. So there are different routes that you can take, and at present, the Solicitors Regulation Authority is changing the way that you qualify as a solicitor. So you now qualify by doing, rather than an LPC, so a legal practice course and a training contract, it's called the SQE. Or the full name of it is the Solicitors Qualifying Examinations. So they're exams that you have to take. And then you also have to have 2 years of qualifying work experience, which you could obtain by working in a law firm. And then at the end of that, you will be qualified as a solicitor. Another way that you could go about it is doing a solicitor apprenticeship. So don't quote me 100%, but I'm pretty sure that if you haven't got a degree from university, the full training period to become a solicitor through the apprenticeship route is 7 years. If you have got a degree, then that is shortened to 4 years. So during those years of training, if you haven't got a degree, you have to obtain that degree by by doing a study day out of work a week, and then you obtain those qualifications in the background, which would mean working on evenings sometimes, as in studying on weekends or evenings, just so that you can keep up with that qualification. But there are lots of perks to apprenticeship, so you can work, you're on the job learning, you're getting the experience that you need, and you're also getting paid while studying to become and working to become the solicitor that you want to be. But apprenticeships are in so many different areas. We take on apprenticeships and apprentices at Higgs that train to become accountants, for example, or you can do an apprenticeship in business. So apprenticeships are really valuable and things I would definitely urge you all to consider if it's something that you'd be minded to do, rather than the university route, or as well as the university route if the apprenticeship that you can take will be shortened if you've already got a degree, for example. So you may be interested in working in a law firm, but not necessarily being a lawyer. So there are many ways that you can do this. So, for example, at my firm, we have a business development department, which deals with all our kind of relationships with our clients. We have a marketing firm, which deals with all our communications that go out, such as on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and that kind of thing. We also have an IT team, we have a standards and ethics team, we have a document solution assistant team, and the document solution assistance team, or DSAs for short, they deal with all of our post scanning, file management, that kind of thing. So there are so many different ways that you could work in a law firm, including being in our finance team, that you could consider if you wanted to. So another alumni of King Ed's, and one of my colleagues called Emily, she was an apprentice in our finance team and recently qualified as an accountant. So whilst she isn't a lawyer, she's still working in a law firm. And I personally think law firms are really good places to work, and there are so many different opportunities. So you don't just have to shut working in a law firm off because you think it's only for lawyers. There are many other opportunities and other roles that you could consider. But if you did want to become a lawyer, I've gone through ways to get in qualified, but you can also take, and it's a really good way of getting your foot in the door, you could take a level entry role, such as a DSA, as I was discussing earlier. So you would come in and you would help with the post team, you would help with our getting our deeds out, storage of documents. So that's a really good way of getting yourself into a law firm, and then you can progress from there. So a lot of DSAs from my firm, they have now been promoted to legal assistants, and a legal assistant is another way that you can get your foot in the door, and this is essentially where you will assist solicitors and other members of the team. And you'll be classed as a fee earner, and you'll be working with clients, you'll be going to client meetings. That's a really good way to get your foot in the door. Quite a few legal assistants at my firm have then been given a opportunity to become a trainee solicitor, which was what I was before I qualified. So it's a really good way that you can, step up from an entry-level role and then build yourself up, which is great, and you're gaining experience and getting paid whilst you're doing it, which, it is a great thing and an invaluable opportunity, really. If you did want to qualify as a solicitor after you've qualified, in law, there is quite a far way that you can go in terms of progressing your career. So there are different levels of promotions. So at my firm, we have associates, then we have senior associates, principal associates, legal directors, and then partners. If you wanted to go to partnership level, then you would have, for me, because we have a limited liability partnership, you would have a stake in the business if that was something that you desired. So, getting up to those levels will take years and years because you need to gain experience, among other things. But if you were aspiring to be a solicitor and you considered, is there anywhere I can move up from there? The answer is yes. There's a lot of ways that you can progress. So that's something really exciting if you wanted or were interested in that. I'm just checking my notes to see if I've covered everything off that I want to talk about. Oh yeah, so just in terms of general employability skills, a couple of quick tips from me, because I can see I've got about 2 minutes left of my slot. You should really try and make yourself stand out. Now, if you're going into a legal career, or any career, if you don't have experience in that particular sector, it doesn't matter. As long as you can show through either voluntary work or your part-time work that you have gained transferable skills, that's something that you can use in your applications to stand you in good stead. So, for example, I had never worked in a law firm before starting my job as a trainee solicitor. I'd only ever done a week of work experience here and there, but I did work in a bookshop, and then I also volunteered with a charity called Support Through Court. So for the bookshop that I worked in, for example, I learned customer service skills, I learned attention to detail and working under pressure. So I was able to use these skills and explain in my application how I've learnt these skills, and I will transfer them to my role as a trainee, as I understand that it's important to give clients a good experience. I understand that being a trainee solicitor and then a solicitor can be a job that comes with time pressures, so it's really important to be able to work under pressure, and this is something that I have gained. And then my final tip would be, if you do or don't have LinkedIn, it's a very good way to keep an eye on opportunities that are available and maybe follow firms that you might be interested in or other companies. For example, my firm posts quite a lot on LinkedIn about opportunities we have, about vacancies, about work experience that we're advertising for. So I think no matter what sector you want to go into, it's a very good idea to have LinkedIn and then just to follow some of those companies so that you can see what they're up to. And then when you are applying to those firms, you will be able to see some of the stuff you've learned on LinkedIn and put it into your application, and then showing you've gone above and beyond and done that bit of research, so that you know about the firm, will go a long way. I've heard from my recruitment team in the past, they sometimes get applications and they say something about the firm, or Higgs in this particular example, that isn't correct. I know that's before somebody said, I'd really interested in immigration law. We don't do immigration law, so that was just a big red flag for the recruiter from the beginning, because the person whose application it was clearly hadn't done their research very well. So yeah, when you're doing your applications, make sure you research the company properly. And then that's the end of my little talk. I hope that's been helpful. I'll pass over to Lou now so that she can pass on to Jules, or straight to Jules, and look forward to any questions at the end if I can help. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant, Lauren. Thank you. I think that's a great whistle stop tour of your own journey, but also the kind of routes into careers. One of the questions we'll come back to at the end, if that's okay, is just about barrister routes as well. So if I can ask you about that after Jules has finished. So I'd like to pass over to Jules, who's going to talk about sort of careers in politics and his journey and information to pass on, and then we'll come back to Q&A. So thank you, Jules. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So hi, everybody. My name's Jules. As Lou introduced at the start, my job is as a communications manager for a Labour Member of Parliament, and I'm also a doctoral researcher at the University of Birmingham, which means I'm doing a PhD. It's just a fancy way of saying it. So I went to King Ed's from 2015 to 2017, so it just sounds like we just missed each other, Lauren, where I studied politics, film, and communication and culture. So those are my 3 A levels. So there's a bit of a trend on social media at the moment. I'm a comms guy, I love my visuals, comparing 2026 to 2016. So I thought I'd jump on board for my presentation. So on the left there is me and some of my A-level politics class, where we're being interviewed by a BBC journalist, Rob Mayer. This was just before the Brexit referendum. And then on the right is actually just 2 weeks ago, I think, of me outside 10 Downing Street having a tour of the place, which was the first time I'd ever been, and it was absolutely surreal. So I've done it because basically my presentation is going to be me speaking about my journey from when I was in your position in college to where I am now, and explaining the different career options that are available to you in politics, and hopefully giving you some top tips for success. So to start off, a bit about my journey. Born and raised in Dudley, never left, or always lived in Dudley. Actually went to school in Birmingham, which is where I first became interested in politics through my work on the UK Youth Parliament. Some of you may well have served on UK Youth Parliament as well. And then I studied politics at King Ed's A-level, and that's where I really cemented, I think, an interest in the academic side of politics. So on the right there is me and my friends on an open day. We were working as student ambassadors. I was lucky enough to get the grades to study politics for an undergraduate degree at the University of Birmingham and continue following my passion. I got properly involved in the student union as my time as a student there, firstly as a part-time officer, then becoming a full-time officer. It was a very difficult time to do it during COVID, but very worthwhile. And I learned a lot about student representation and the importance of, representing others who may not otherwise have a voice. While I was working at the student union, I decided to do a distance learning masters in social policy and social research at University College London. And I felt really lucky to have been able to do this because UCL is one of the top 10 universities in the world. So I felt really privileged to have such a top class education. So after I finished working at the student union, I still had a year to go of my part-time masters. So I decided to get a job at the university because it was familiar. It was a familiar environment to me, and I was unsure about my next steps. It was also during this time that I became a trustee at a student union down in London and returned to King Ed's as a governor. I'd only been away a few years, but I was missing it already. I had a range of jobs while I was working there. It was about 2.5 years I was at the university. But one of my favourite jobs was actually during working for the outreach team, where I was managing a Pathways to Birmingham program, which is how I got into UAB myself. Some of you might have heard of A to B or be doing A to B or another Pathways to Birmingham program. So that's actually a job I used to have when I was working at the University of Birmingham. So I finished my master's and started thinking about a PhD, but I was a little bit unsure about where I was going career-wise. But luckily for me, Rishi Sunak decided to call a general election, and I had the chance to campaign for the Labour Party, of which I've been a member for over 10 years in my home constituency of Dudley. So the picture on the left there, you'll see Sonia Kumar at the front, who was the Labour candidate for Dudley at the time, who is now the MP for Dudley. She was successful in her election. There's myself at the back holding up a sign, and there's some fellow campaigners. And at the front there is Richard Parker, some of you might recognise, who is the Mayor of the West Midlands. So I ran Sonia's social media during that campaign. I'd done like light bits of like volunteering when it came to social media before, but hadn't really done it like as serious as a level to working doing it during a general election. And during the campaign, I got knocking on lots of doors, speaking to residents, basically promoting Sonia, promoting her vision, like saying why she was the best candidate for the job. Fortunately, she won, as did lots of other Labour MPs. So while I was still exploring my sort of career options, because I'd sort of put politics to the side at that point to focus on working at a university, I set out looking for a job because lots of Labour MPs were hiring. And after a few applications, I found one locally in Wolverhampton. That's the job I do now. So I put myself forward and got it. I decided to pursue my own political ambitions as well by putting myself forward for a seat on Dudley Council. So the election for that is in May, and I'm currently working hard to try and win, designing a newsletter, going out and speaking to residents myself as the candidate, which feels very strange to be doing, but something I'm really enjoying doing. So to talk about my current job, my exact job title is Constituency Communications Manager, which I do for Warinder Just MP. So there's a photo of me and Warinder on the right there. So he's the Member of Parliament for the constituency called Wolverhampton West. Some of you might be his constituents, I don't know. And some of my responsibilities for that job are handling social media, so his Facebook, his Instagram, Blue Sky rather than X. We're off X completely, and LinkedIn as well. Those are the main four social media that we try and promote him on as much as possible. I also do working with the press, so speak to lots of journalists, both locally. So the Express and Star are always on speed dial for me because they're always after a story involving we're indoors, other stuff going on in Wolverhampton. But it also involves some national press as well. So if there's something nationally that Warinder is interested in, that Sky News or BBC want him to go on television for, I'm normally doing the liaising to get him on TV. I also manage his constituency diary, so he's normally in Parliament Monday to Thursday, and then he comes home on Thursday evening normally. So we always say I have him Friday to Sunday, where it's my responsibility to put visits in his diary to different businesses, charities, schools, in the constituency, so that he can be hearing from people directly, because the majority of the week is actually not in the constituency he's representing. So it's important that he uses his time as effectively as possible to speak to as many people as possible and as to what's happening on the ground. Something else to do is writing speeches and briefings. So if he has to do a speech at an event he's at, normally have to be the one doing some research about that. Most of the time he likes to do things off the cuff, but if it's a really complicated thing on a topic that he's not familiar with, then it's up to me to make sure I do the research so that he's fully aware of what he's going into and what he's going to have to speak about. And then finally, running events and campaigns. So if it's not something that we're going to in the constituency that someone else has organised, it's events that we're organising. So he likes to do coffee mornings on the weekend to speak to residents about any particular issue they want to talk about. Advice surgeries is something that I have to coordinate. So if somebody, we have a team of caseworkers, but if they want to speak to Warinda directly, Warinda always makes time to speak to constituents one-to-one for any particular issue that they have, and we'll try and help them as much as possible. And then there's also the campaigns element of my job as well. So he is really big on tackling knife crime and youth violence. So a lot of that involves liaising with his parliamentary assistant to make sure that he's attending particular debates on that topic, meeting certain stakeholders either in Parliament or in the constituency that sort of share his vision, and making sure that we are going on a journey where he can make an actual difference to it. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is running a bit of a fundraiser to get bleed kits into schools. So a bleed kit is something that could potentially save somebody's life. It's like an enhanced first aid kit to help someone if they are unfortunately the victim of a stabbing. So there's some more photos there just from my job because it's very varied. I tend to work from home 1 day a week, go to the office 3 days a week, and go to Parliament once a week, which is quite a nice balance. Sometimes parliamentary work spills into the constituency. So Warinda is actually on the Justice Select Committee. And a lot of the work that he's doing at the moment is focused on prisons. So there's a bit of a spillover actually into the law element of this. I'd never been to a prison before working for Warinda, and now I've been to a few. Had a walk around, and it's quite an eye-opening experience actually. Really love the variety of my job and how open Warinda is to new ideas. So on the picture on the left over there, I was actually running the Wolverhampton 10K, and suddenly I had the idea, oh, what if I asked the organisers if Warinda could get involved? And the organisers said yes, Warinda said yes, and he ended up giving out the medals to the podium places. In the middle there is Sonia, who's my MP where I live in Dudley, and Warinda were all together out of a Saki event, which is a Sikh celebration actually in Parliament, which I helped organise. And then on the right is Warinda and I having a tour of air traffic control at Birmingham Airport, because all of the local authorities in the West Midlands have a small stake in the airport. I don't know if people knew that, so they actually invited us on a tour, and we got to walk on the tarmac and everything. It was very cool. It would be boring of me to show you photos of me sitting at my desk writing a press release for the Express and Star, but believe me when I say that is what I spend what is possibly most of my week doing, but there are some exciting bits as well. So that's my job. Just talk about my research a little bit. So it was actually my undergraduate supervisor when I was still working there, who convinced me to consider a PhD. We had no idea what I was going to do it on, but he knew I was passionate about politics, and he knew I was passionate about universities and higher education. So he said, why don't you look into doing some research combining the two? So I went away for a few weeks and had to think about it, and ultimately came back with this idea to do some research for a PhD into government regulation of widening access to higher education. So remember I said earlier, I really enjoyed working in outreach and managing a Pathways to Birmingham program. I decided to sort of combine these two passions of mine. So my research is looking at how ideology for some of you might be doing A-level politics, might be studying this right now, looking at how things like socialism and conservatism have influenced the political parties from 1997 when the Labour government got elected until present, because a bunch of different governments have served. They've had different policies on how we best get students from underrepresented backgrounds going to university. So my research is essentially focused on that. The photo there is me and Bridget Phillipson, who's the Secretary of State for Education, who I met at Labour Party conference twice, fortunately, which was quite nice. So that was my first week doing my PhD, which I wish it had been like one of my last weeks, so I could tell her everything that I'd researched. But I did get to chat to her about my research, and she said she'd be interested in reading it once it was complete, which was quite nice. So just to talk about careers in politics outside of working in an MP's office, you have lots of options open to you for a career. I'm still only 27 myself, so I'm exploring my options of what I want to do after working in an MP's office, because it doesn't typically end up being a job for life. It is for some, but for most people, you only do it for a couple of years, and then you think about what you want to do afterwards. But I would honestly consider pursuing some work experience in MP's office if you get the opportunity to do it, because you'll get to see and experience a wide variety of things, as I've just said. So some of the options open to you. One of the things might be the charity and the non-profit sector. So the majority of larger charities have policy and public affairs departments. So, I mean, the policy part is fairly self-explanatory, but public affairs, for those that don't know, is a department of an organization whose responsibility it is to lobby MPs, to meet with them, convince them that their organization's work needs shouting about. Normally, they'll hold up a big board. They'll have MPs holding up a big board in Parliament saying this is why, X policy or X law needs to happen, just to get a little bit of media attention and get it on the government's agenda. So it'd be your responsibility, if you were in that job, to get that charity's issues and concerns like raised to try and promote it in the media. Corporate government affairs is also an option, so similar to the charity role, but for bigger companies and maybe even stuff like banks. You'd be promoting the company in the press and the communities within which they operate. The government or the civil service is an option. So some of you have probably heard of the civil service fast stream. Very, very competitive. I applied twice myself. Unfortunately, didn't get anywhere. But I've heard stories of people applying 4 or 5 times before they get in. So definitely resilience is something that's needed for those particular jobs. Worth noting that they do tend to be politically neutral roles. So someone like me now, running to be a Labour councillor, they would not hire me in an instant. But you guys are obviously very early on in your political careers if you're interested in careers in politics. So if you do think that you want to go into the civil service, be very, very careful on, how much you're putting out there on things like social media about how interested you are in one particular party, or saying negative things about other political parties. Local government is very similar to the civil service, but it'd be working locally for a council. Again, would probably be politically restricted. So an example of local government is a photo of me at the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is a sort of regional level of government, if you guys are familiar with that. So some of my work involves working with them. Media is an option. Some of you might not think that media is an option for a career in politics, but it definitely is. So being a political journalist or being a researcher for a news program tend to be the most common jobs here, at least with a political focus. And then finally, consultancies and think tanks. So political consultancies tend to lobby politicians on behalf of corporations, but they also offer non-political corporate communications for companies. And then think tanks tend to recruit people with research and statistical analysis experience, given how research intensive the jobs are. So if that's something you're interested in, and if university is something that you're considering, definitely have a think about how you can incorporate statistical analysis into what you're studying, because it's definitely useful for those types of jobs in politics. So just finally, some top tips for you. Firstly, I would say that networking is key when it comes to careers in politics. At least it has been for me. The bottom line is there's lots of people out there who have a network of contacts because they went to private school or they have parents or guardians with connections to help them. I didn't have any of that. I'm from a working class background. You should not let that stand in your way of building your own network of contacts. Lauren gave some really good advice earlier about LinkedIn. If you don't have LinkedIn, I will happily second that advice. LinkedIn is definitely your friend. When the time comes, make sure that you're going to things like conferences, putting yourself out there, and getting to know people to create those mutually beneficial relationships. Don't be someone that, tries to get these relationships just to benefit you. Do it so that it's going to be mutually beneficial so that you can give back to them. And it's a great way for them to then introduce you to someone else because you've helped them and create a big network. Um, yeah, like I said, I was the first in my family to go to university. I'm sure many of you guys are going to be in the same position, but I didn't let that stop me from going after what I wanted, and it's definitely my network now. The photo there is me in the Dudley Labour group, who are current councillors, who are helping me when it comes to my elections. So yeah, networking is very important. Secondly, be prepared to start small. I still consider myself being in a really small position now, working for an MP's office. There's 650 MPs and even more staff. There's lots of other, glamorous careers that I literally just spoke about that I want to go into one day. So don't worry if you're starting small. If your first job is something like doing admin, everybody's got to start somewhere, and you will work your way up. And internships and work experience that are a great way to do that. And you guys are in a great position at the moment. Being at college and having a little bit more time than people in full-time work to get that experience. You don't have to study politics, and I know I'm saying this as somebody that's literally doing a PhD in politics, but to have a career in one, you don't have to study it. Lots of people I know in civil service jobs did things like geography or English. What employers are looking for is transferable skills. A passion for it is going to shine through if that's what you want to do. Which leads me on to my last point nicely, which is that the journey is not necessarily going to be linear. So if you talk about my journey as an example, I was convinced that after I finished my master's, that I was going to have a career working in higher education and working at a university and sort of build my way up there, despite studying politics. But here I am now working for an MP and on track to think about having a long career in politics instead or in public affairs. Um, there's a lot of things that I said, oh, I'm never going to do that, which I'm now doing, which is absolutely fine to do. Like I wouldn't even call them mistakes. Like it's okay to make mistakes, but I wouldn't call them mistakes because it's how I felt at the time. I changed my mind. That's how I feel now. So it's okay to reconsider things because everything that you guys are going to go through is going to be a learning experience and it's all going to be for your own benefit. So yeah, that's my presentation. I think it's time for some questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jules. That's absolutely brilliant. A really interesting journey from both of our guests, Lauren and Jules. And before we just jump to questions, I'd like to just draw some analogies there for students about skill sets. And I think it's very obvious that despite the difference in the kind of sectors that you've both joined, there's some real commonality of soft skills as well as those academic skills that you did sort of gathered through college. And I think this work experience and the sort of internships and the networking and the confidence to grow and try something out is something I can identify in both of your journeys, that actually, from the age of leaving at 18, you've kind of really grown through those opportunities and those skills. And I'd like to encourage all students to kind of view that and say that around those academic subjects, you do need to build those networks, those extra skills with communications, with, all of those things that we can list. And I'd encourage all students to join into the pathway and lean into the support and opportunities that we offer through the pathway, the law, politics and society pathway, and through the general things through college, like the careers fair that we have coming up on the 4th of February. Lauren is able to attend that and will be there both in terms of their stand for Higgs, but also talking about apprenticeships in a separate talk. And Jules, I know people would be happy to join perhaps with you on LinkedIn if they've got any, particular desire to learn more about your journey and opportunities. So if I could just turn to Lauren, I had a question before about barristers and just talking about the sort of the how you take a route into becoming a barrister, because I think it's just a little bit of one of those questions that was asked in advance that may not be clear for some students.
No, that's fine. So just as a bit of an overview first, so a barrister is the person that you would see presenting the case in court to the judge. Sometimes they're the ones on TV you see wearing the wigs and the gowns. So that is what a barrister's main role is. They're the ones that do the speaking in the court. Sometimes they can give a client initial advice before the matter goes to court. So sometimes I have contacted barristers and said, if this matter was to go to court, what do you think my client's chances are of success? And then that barrister will produce a big written advice basically on hers chances on success if they were to make a claim. So in terms of becoming a barrister, you do need to have a law degree. Or you can do a conversion course if you've not done a law degree. So if you did a conversion course, I'm sure it's called a GDL, and that's the additional year that you would do on top of your degree to have that conversion then. So once you have got your degree or your degree with a conversion, you then have to become, and this is quite an old-fashioned rule that kind of has just stuck now throughout people qualifying as barristers, but you have to become a member of an inn. And an inn, basically there's 4 different inns. So there's Lincoln's Inn, Middle Temple, Inner Temple and Gray's Inn. And barristers all over the country, or people aspiring to be barristers, they have to be part of one of those 4 inns. So within that, you basically join the group, and then you can get different benefits depending on which inn that you've gone for, and different inns have different values that might align with your own, which helps you pick which inn you want to go to. So to do that, because I haven't qualified as a barrister, I'm not 100% sure how you go through it, but from my knowledge, you basically go onto their website, and I think there's probably a short application you have to do as to why you want to join that particular inn. So once you have joined an inn, you then have to do a bar vocational course, which is also known as the bar course. So you can go to universities like the University of Law, and they would then teach you the bar course, and that lasts for a year. So the difference between training as a solicitor and a barrister, your year's training course will mostly be on advocacy, so that you learn different techniques of how to present something in court. So you'd have to therefore do that year's training. During that time, you have to go to what's called mandatory dinners as part of your inn. I think it's 12 dinners, but yeah, I think it's 12 dinners that you have to attend throughout your year, but you basically have to go to different dinners. As I was saying, it's a little bit of an old-fashioned rule, but it's quite a nice thing, I think, that you have to go to these dinners. You meet other people, you networking, you'll meet barristers, you'll meet lecturers, you'll meet other aspiring barristers. So it is a nice thing. So yeah, you have to attend those dinners, you have to do your year training, and then once you have completed the bar course, you are then called to the bar, it's called, and at that point that you've been called to the bar, you're then a qualified barrister. But you cannot practice as a barrister, so you can't work as a barrister at that point. You have to get what's called a pupillage, which is basically professional training. So you get a pupillage at barristers' chambers. So in Birmingham, for example, there is number 5 chambers, St Ives chambers, 3PB, and they're different barristers' sets, which essentially is where, a bit like I work for Higgs LLP, if you're a barrister, you will work for number 5 barristers' chambers. So you get in touch with the chambers, you apply for their pupillage, which is a 12 to 18 month supervised training placement. You will be supervised by an allocated barrister or barristers, dependent on how your training is set up. You'll then shadow them for a certain period of time, and then you will take on your own cases in a courtroom by yourself, where you'll stand up and present the case to a judge. They call that on your feet. So when you're a trainee barrister on your feet, that's when you are then presenting in court your own cases. So then at the end of that pupillage, you are either offered a role by the chambers to stay on as a permanent tenant. So you can stay on at, say, number 5 barristers' chambers as a barrister, and you can work from there, you practice from there, and you're attached to that brand. Or if you're unsuccessful, you can try and extend your training with them, or you can apply to another chambers for a job, essentially. So I know some people that trained up in the north, and then they relocated to Birmingham, so they completed the training up north and then moved down to Birmingham to actually settle in chambers there. So that's the training, and I hope that helps.
It does. It sounds very complicated, but I like the idea of attending inns and dinners. I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah,
but I understand it's a very complex and obviously testing process. We've got some questions coming through, if that's okay. But hi, thank you for this talk. I'm interested in corporate law at the moment, but long term I'd like to transition into human rights or international law, perhaps even advocacy. Thus, what kinds of work experience and opportunities would you recommend I start looking for early on that would keep both pathways open? So that's into human rights, international law, and possibly advocacy. And actually, I think that crosses both pathways. I don't know if Lauren, if you want to speak first briefly, and then I'll go on to Jules as well and see Jules has got any ideas as well.
Yeah, so from my point of view, if you wanted to get some sort of experience or opportunities in those areas, it would be a good idea to contact law firms that do those areas of law, so that you can contact them, and maybe you could apply formally through their work experience programs, or they might be able to get you in for a week informally. It would depend on the law firm and their setup, but it'd be a good idea to get in touch to see if there's anything that they could help you with. In terms of the advocacy work, so if you're a barrister or solicitor, you can actually cross-qualify. So I know a few solicitors that really enjoyed the advocacy side of things, because solicitors can talk in court unless it's a high court matter, which basically just means it's a bit more complex, it's a bit more serious, then only barristers have the right of audience to talk there. So some solicitors that do enjoy talking in the county courts, the lower courts, they cross-qualify and become a barrister, and then obviously then they're doing more advocacy. So if that was something that you were interested in, you could always consider cross-qualifying at that stage in your career. And then in terms of opportunities, I think it's always good. Some law firms sometimes host seminars on certain areas of law. So I know my firm often does employment rights seminars that anybody can join. So maybe if a law firm you're interested in hosts that kind of session, it would be good for you to join that, because you can learn a little bit more about it. And then, you know, down the road, if you apply to that firm, you could say, I attended this talk on this and this, and I thought these talkers were really good, and I learned this, just to show that, you know, make yourself stand out a little bit. But yeah, I'll pass over to Jules.
Thank you, Jules. I don't know if you've got any ideas on that, particularly about human rights, etc., as well, and international law. I don't know if you've come across that area at all in your work.
A little. What I would say is public-private partnerships, like things like the United Nations and other think tanks and NGOs, are probably a good place to get that sort of experience, I would say.
Thank you, that's great. Another question, thanks for this. In terms of apprenticeships, is there any other you would recommend for soliciting, particularly degree apprenticeships? And do firms look for certain work experience?
So I think in terms of firms and do they look for certain work experience, I think it does look good if you've got legal experience, but it's not the be all or end all. If you can show that you've got experience in a part-time job and how the experience there will help you as a solicitor apprentice, for example, that is a really good way to make yourself stand out a little bit. If you have something at Higgs that we're passionate about is giving our clients a good service and making sure they're happy, responding to emails quickly, doing the job properly. And if you say had a part-time job in a care home, if you're looking after people, meeting their needs, you could explain how the skills that you've learned at that care home transfer, and how you would therefore that's okay, how you'd therefore then be good at a solicitor apprenticeship role. So hopefully that answers your question, but no, I don't think firms don't look for particular experience, but anything that you can kind of show.
Sure. And I think, Lauren, as well, it's true to say that if you're looking at an apprenticeship in general, whether that's in law or politics, business, anywhere, you need to have those key skills at an earlier stage to demonstrate. So that work experience, etc., is really, really important. Just to go on to Inez's question, Jules, wanted to ask how closely connected are legal careers to politics in practice? Actually, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because we can see some kind of like-minded kind of work ethics about both sectors. Do you have anything you could comment on that?
Absolutely, I can. So my knowledge of like law and legal practice before I started this job was actually probably quite limited. I remember doing one module related to law in my undergrad because you had to do one different optional one. So I think I did a tort law module. Couldn't remember anything about it now. So we're into the MP I work for. He used to be a solicitor before he worked for Thompson Solicitors for about 30 years before he became an MP. So he did clinical negligence. So I've learned a lot about that since I started working for him. And like I said, some of the stuff that's parliamentary or his other work spills over to the constituency. So Lauren mentioned number five chambers earlier. So I've been to number five chambers and we do a lot of work with the Bar Council, for example. There's a big debate going on at the moment in Parliament on juries and whether or not jury trials should continue because of a big backlog in courts. All of this, I couldn't like do big articles or stuff about it, but it's just stuff that sort of seeped through. So for me in my role, actually, there's a lot of legal work involved. If I had a legal background, I think I'd be able to do a lot more with that particular side of it. So in practice, it actually does help quite well. And a lot of so Warrender's on the Justice Select Committee, for example, a lot of the clerks that service that committee, they themselves have a legal background. So there's a lot of crossover in my job.
That's really interesting, actually, how that in practice there is a lot of crossover, I guess, between the two, and probably less politics in the legal firm in one way, but actually more in the politics world of the legal process and interaction with law and the law. There are a couple more questions, and we're literally running out of time, but there's just a quick questions, I think there, Lauren, about pursuing a career as a solicitor, with transferable skills, and perhaps also via the apprenticeship route at Higgs particularly. All law firms are slightly different as to how they take on, whether that's through an apprenticeship or an early entry careers and developing those. Have you just got a quick comment on process there for us?
No, that's fine. I can see there's probably about 3 or 4, but they're quite quick, so I'm happy to just go through all if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll start with Grace's. So you were wondering if it's possible to explain the apprenticeship route and application process at Higgs. So the application process at Higgs, as at present, we've only been taking solicitor apprentices internally, so people that have been, say, a legal assistant, and then they've gone for the application to be a solicitor apprentice. That's how we've been getting our solicitor apprentices at the moment. However, my understanding is that we are or will be advertising externally for solicitor apprenticeship routes. In terms of the exact application process, I'm not too sure because I wasn't involved with it or won't be involved with it. But when I had to interview for my role as a trainee solicitor, I had an initial interview and with our recruiter, and then I had to do a basic maths and English test. You'll hear of those also called like a Watson Glaser test, and they are quite common really when you're going for a legal career to have to do those sorts of tests. But if it helps, I got below average and I still ended up qualified, so it's not the be all or end all if that doesn't go well for you. But that is something that I had to do when I was doing my application processes. Once you've done that maths and English test, I then had to have a second interview. I was then successful and then came in for that week work experience called a vacation scheme that I spoke about. So I imagine that the solicitor apprentice application process would be very similar to that. With you being interviewed by different members of the firm, and then you might have to do another one of those tests, for example. And then in terms of that route, it will depend on whether you've got a degree or whether you haven't. If you haven't got a degree, the apprenticeship is longer. I believe it's 7 years, and then you have to study 1 day a week, dependent on the setup. It might be 2 days a week. You'll then obviously have to study it on evenings or weekends, and then if you have got a degree, your apprenticeship will be shorter. So yeah, but my Higgs recruitment team are really happy to answer any questions you have. So if you did have a look on LinkedIn and got in touch with through the LinkedIn page, I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to answer any questions. So I can see Phoebe has asked if you'd still be able to pursue a career as a solicitor with transferable skills if you did a degree in English, and if so, yes, what would the process of that be post-university? So yeah, if you wanted to do an English degree, you definitely pick up transferable skills because you would have to meet deadlines to hit your get your like your assignments submitted. You'd have to hit those deadlines. You'd be working under pressure. You'd have a lot of things going on. You'd have to learn how to organise yourself because you'd want to have a social life. You'd need to hit your assignments. You'd need to attend your seminars. So there are lots of transferable skills that you'd learn from that degree that would transfer to being a solicitor. And then in terms of the post-university process, because you would have a law degree, you'd have an English degree, sorry, you would then be able to do the solicitors qualifying exams because you don't need a law degree to do that anymore. You can have any degree to do the solicitor qualifying exams. So yeah, post-university, that's what you would look at. You'd need to do your solicitor qualifying examinations and then continue through that route. Let me just have a look. Karina wanted to know if solicitors represent clients in court. So yeah, solicitors have rights of audience, but only in the county court. So a county court deals with lower value claims or less complex claims. So a solicitor can talk at that and represent their clients. If, as I said, it's a more complex case or, it's worth millions, billions of pounds, a barrister would do that because that would need to go to the high courts. There's a bit of a hierarchy, like a county court is here and then a high court's here and then it goes to like the Supreme Court, for example. So there's a bit of a hierarchy there. But yes, law firms and solicitors can represent their clients in court, but most of the time, and from my experience, we mostly do the work behind the scenes. We prep the barristers and then the barrister goes to court and presents the case. Emily has asked if Higgs offer work experience placements, and if so, would this usually be advertised? Yes, it's always advertised. Our marketing team is very good at getting things out to everybody on LinkedIn or Facebook or any other platforms that we use. I know that we also do have a YouTube channel where they post some stuff on as well, so you might be able to see things on there. And I do know that Higgs offer a work experience, and I think Lou, you might be aware of this, in fact, but it's specifically targeted at year 12 college students. So if you were in year 12, you'd be able to apply for this. I'm just trying to get it up on the website and see what it is called. Here we go.
We normally send that round. Sorry.
Perfect. No, that's okay. So yeah, it's called the Legal Foundations Career Insight Scheme. So I don't think from looking at our website, I don't think the dates have been released for that yet, but I'm sure they will be soon because it usually
We'll
happens
send a
in the
link
summer.
round. Yeah, we'll send a link round along with the presentations and things and the recording so that students have got that as well. That's
Great.
brilliant. Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. Jules, one final thing to you. If you had one tip that you could give to students, I mean, you've given many in your presentation, but what would you think of in terms of perhaps across the subjects that we have actually covered tonight? What would be your top tip for students?
I would say never give up. Honestly, work hard and never give up. I think that's very transferable over any of the careers. You guys are in a very lucky position to be exploring lots of different options at the moment. And like I said in my presentation, it's okay to make mistakes. Okay to, um, not be too sure on exactly what you want to do at the moment. Just persevere, and I know you guys will do well.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to both of you for joining us this evening, for giving us the benefit of your experiences and those discussions as well in answering questions. Students, we hope you've made the most of these opportunities, but we will send round the recording as well. Do join with Jules, with Lauren, LinkedIn, with myself and Faye and the college to make sure that you get all of that information and networking opportunities. And also, if anybody's not signed up for the Law, Politics and Society pathway, please do so. Faye has been really busy prepping this in advance with some great links that we have gone into the chat function, and we'll send that all round to you following the meeting in the morning. Lauren and Jules, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Don't forget, students, the careers fair as well on the 4th February evening, 6 till 8:15. There will be plenty of opportunity to see Lauren, other law firms, and plenty of other experiences with other employers as well. Thank you both, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Take
coming.
care. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.